There is a kind of news story that does not arrive with a bang. It does not explode across the headlines all at once. It is not accompanied by an official announcement or a player holding up a shirt. It begins quietly, almost uncomfortably, like a whisper moving through the corridors of English football. In recent days, this atmosphere has once again started to hover over the Premier League, creating a strange feeling among directors, journalists, and the more attentive supporters. Something is shifting behind the scenes, and when that kind of movement happens, it is rarely by chance. Those who follow the transfer market closely know that these stories tend to follow a curious pattern. First, small and scattered pieces of information begin to emerge. Then, names start to be linked to unexpected situations. And finally, clubs that seem to be off the radar suddenly enter the picture. It is at this point that supporters realize they might be facing a major twist. If you enjoy keeping up with this kind of behind-the-scenes story before everyone else, now is a good time to subscribe to the channel, because this is where these narratives gain proper context. Over the past few days, one of these situations has started to take shape involving major clubs in England, a young European talent, and a battle that initially appeared to have very clear paths. Football, however, rarely follows obvious scripts. What once seemed settled began to develop new layers, new interested parties, and, most importantly, a new level of tension. And when that happens, someone usually loses out if they fail to act quickly. Within this context, the January transfer window continues to do exactly what it does best: create anxiety. Clubs weigh up risks, run the numbers, assess injuries, and try to anticipate the moves of their rivals. Sometimes, a decision made too late costs an entire season. At other times, swift action can completely change the direction of a sporting project. It is precisely this kind of crossroads that is now starting to appear. According to recent reports, Tottenham Hotspur have been unsettled by the news that Newcastle United are ready to step fully into the race to sign Bobb, the Norwegian winger from Manchester City. A young, technical, and fearless player, Bobb now finds himself at the centre of an unexpected battle that could alter plans both in London and in the northeast of England. Until not long ago, Tottenham appeared to have a relatively clear route in this process. On the 16th of January 2026, Football Insider published a report by transfer specialist journalist Pete O'Rourke stating that the London club were interested in signing Bobb during this window. According to the report, the player himself would be open to leaving Manchester City, who would not rule out a permanent sale. That information sparked a wave of optimism among Spurs supporters, especially because Bobb fits a profile the club have been searching for over some time. A winger capable of playing on both flanks, young, with room to develop, and experience within one of the most competitive squads in world football. But the transfer market rarely allows calm for long, and new characters quickly entered the scene. Shortly afterwards, the situation became even more significant when Fabrizio Romano, one of the most respected sources in the transfer market, shared an important update on the 20th of January. On his X account, Romano reported exclusively that Fulham were in negotiations to sign Bobb permanently from Manchester City, with a bid of around £35 million already on the table. In addition, Romano highlighted that Borussia Dortmund had remained interested in the player since December and were assessing whether to submit a formal offer. In other words, what once seemed manageable had evolved into a scenario involving multiple clubs, different leagues, and tight deadlines. At that stage, any misreading of the situation could prove fatal for those hoping to complete the deal. It is at exactly this moment that Newcastle United entered the story. According to a recent report from Sportsboom, the club managed by Eddie Howe have officially joined the race and are ready to make a move to bring Bobb to St. James' Park. This information landed like a bomb behind the scenes, especially for Tottenham, who were already feeling pressure from Fulham and Dortmund. According to Sportsboom, Newcastle see Bobb as the perfect fit for their high-intensity, attacking style of play. The report states that the club believed the Norwegian would slot naturally into Eddie Howe's system, offering pace, creativity, and unpredictability down the flanks. This assessment helps explain why the interest is being treated internally as a priority. The same report notes that Tottenham continue to monitor the player situation closely but acknowledge that Fulham currently lead the race and are confident of completing the deal before the window closes. Even so, Newcastle's entry alone completely changes the dynamic of the negotiation, particularly given the club's recent ambition and financial strength. It is important to stress that, so far, no other source beyond Sportsboom has confirmed Newcastle's interest in Bobb. However, in the transfer market, the lack of multiple confirmations does not mean the threat is small. Many negotiations progress quietly, and by the time they become public, it is often already too late to respond. Bobb, just 22 years old, is viewed as a long-term signing. Despite currently being sidelined with a muscular injury, the Norwegian has a track record that justifies the level of interest. He has made 47 appearances for Manchester City, scoring 3 goals and providing 4 assists. Modest figures, but meaningful given the intense competition for places in the squad. On Sportsboom, Bobb is praised for his close control, technical quality, and fearless dribbling. These are traits that fit perfectly with the profile of modern Premier League wingers. Players capable of breaking lines, creating numerical advantages and changing the tempo of a match within seconds. Another factor carrying significant weight in this analysis is the player's age. At just 22, Bobb is still developing and has the potential to improve considerably in the coming years. For clubs like Newcastle, who are building a solid and progressive project, this type of investment makes sense both sporting-wise and financially. It is also worth remembering that Bobb missed a large part of last season due to a leg fracture, which naturally encourages caution. However, for those thinking in the medium to long term, this is not seen as a deal-breaker. On the contrary, it could even influence the timing of the move and the structure of any proposal. For Newcastle United supporters, this news reinforces the feeling that the club are no longer merely reacting to the market, but positioning themselves strategically. Entering a battle of this scale, involving Manchester City, Tottenham, Fulham, and even Borussia Dortmund, signals a new level of ambition. That is exactly why keeping up with every update matters. If you want to continue receiving detailed news, with context and behind-the-scenes insight that often goes unnoticed, subscribing to the channel helps our work immensely and ensures you do not miss a single chapter of this story.